Jyoti Singh. Jyoti was born in 1989 to Asha Devi and Badri Singh. Jyoti was born and raised in Delhi. Her parents were from a small village in Uttar Pradesh. Jyoti's mother stated that Jyoti means light. When Jyoti was born, we were given the gift of light and happiness, she said. Jyoti had wanted to be a doctor since childhood, but her family worried about being able to afford the cost of her education. Jyoti had suggested to her father that he use the money that he'd been saving for her wedding. Her family decided to sell some ancestral land to help fund Jyoti's education. Jyoti would study at college by day and then work at a call centre by night to further fund her studies. At 23, Jyoti had sat her exams and she'd come home from college. Her mum noticed that Jyoti was much more relaxed. She was excited about becoming a qualified doctor and supporting her family. On the 16th of December 2012, Awindra, Jyoti's friend, asked for permission to watch a film with Jyoti. Jyoti's mum gave them permission and asked them to come home early. Jyoti and her friend watched The Life of Pi and were heading home. Whilst looking for transport, a male called them towards a bus stating that it was going in the direction that they were headed. Jyoti and her friend boarded this bus. Once it started moving, they realised it was going in the opposite direction that they needed. There were 6 others on the bus: Mukesh Singh and his brother Ram Singh, Vinay Sharma, Akshay Thakur, Pawan Gupta, and a male thought to be 17 at the time. The men started to question Jyoti and her friend as to why they were out alone at night. It was around 8:30 p.m. The men started to take Jyoti and her friend's belongings, a watch, a jacket, mobile phone, shoes, etc., and they were putting them on. A scuffle broke out, and the men started to beat both Jyoti and her friend Awindra. The men switched off the lights to the bus, and they drove around public highways. On the moving bus, they hit Jyoti on the head and dragged her to the back of the bus. They gagged her and then took turns to beat and rape her, whilst one of them would drive the bus. One of the men used a rusted iron rod that they used as a car jack to put inside her. One of them put his hand inside her and pulled out what he thought was her intestines. Eventually, one of them shouted, "She's dead, throw her out somewhere." They tried to open the back doors of the bus, but they were jammed. Both Jyoti and her friend were still partially naked. They were thrown out of the front of the moving bus on a public highway. A member of the public found them at around 11 p.m. on the side of the highway. He described Jyoti as looking like a cow that had given birth to a calf. He borrowed some bedsheets from a nearby hotel and covered their partially naked bodies. The men dispersed. 2 of the men stayed behind to clean the bus because the bus was covered in blood, the doors, the windows, and the floors. They then went home and slept. When Jyoti arrived at the hospital, the doctors said that it was like nothing they'd ever seen before. Jyoti was conscious and telling them exactly what had happened. The doctor described her as bleeding and clearly in intense pain. She had bruises and bite marks all over her face and body and multiple injuries on her private parts. The doctor stated, "All the functions of a human body had finished. We couldn't even start to put her back together." Jyoti's father was under the impression that she had been in a car accident. It was the doctor that informed him of the severity of the incident and the impact of her injuries. Shortly afterwards, Jyoti was transferred to a hospital in Singapore for treatment. On the 29th of December, Jyoti died of her injuries in the Singapore hospital and was later flown back to Delhi for her cremation. Jyoti's friend Awindra had sustained non-fatal injuries and survived. The press dubbed Jyoti Nirbhya, which means the fearless one. Jyoti's mother later disclosed Jyoti's given name because she had nothing to be ashamed of. 5 days after Jyoti's death, on the 3rd of January 2013, the police filed charges against 5 adult men for rape, murder, kidnapping, destruction of evidence, and the attempted murder of Jyoti's friend Awindra. One of the lawyers for the men, Manohar Lal Sharma, said in a media interview that the victims were responsible for the assault because they should not have been using public transport as an unmarried couple, that they should not have been on the streets at night. He went on to say that until today, I have not seen a single incident or example of rape with a respected lady. Even an underworld don would not like to touch a girl with respect. He also called the male victim wholly responsible for the incident because he failed in his duty to protect the woman. Mukesh Singh, one of the men on the bus, on a TV interview said, "If she hadn't tried to fight us and let us rape her, we would have let her live. She would just have been raped and dropped off." In March 2013, one of the men, Ram Singh, was found hanged in his cell. The 17-year-old male served 3 years in a reform facility, which was the maximum term possible for a juvenile in India at the time. The remaining 4 men were convicted of rape, murder, unnatural offences, and destruction of evidence. On the 20th of March 2020 at 5:30 a.m. Indian Summer Time, the 4 adult convicts were executed by hanging at Tihar jail and were declared dead 30 minutes after the hanging. Minutes after the convicts were hanged, Jyoti's mother said, "I hugged my daughter's photograph and told her, we finally got justice."